Máme skvelú tému, skvelého hostia. Viac vám k nemu povie o chvíľku Martina Bodulova, ale ja len chcem povedať, že na Narni prebieha v tomto týždni týždeň C.S.LEWISa. A máme tu človeka, ktorý je na C.S.LEWISa top svetový expert a sme si povedali, že dáme tému, ktorá by nám mohla byť všetkým blízka. Tak Martina, prosím ťa, predstav hostia. A potom bude diskusia, 10 až 15 minút dáme diskusiu.
Ahojte všetci, sme radi, že tu môžeme byť a na to, som vám predstavila profesora Williamsa. Študoval modernú históriu na univerzite v Oxforde, svoj bakalársky titul odtiaľ získal a neskôr sa venoval filozofii a systematickej teológii. Svoj doktorát skončil na univerzite v Yale, americkej univerzite. A momentálne učí na Union Theological College v Belfaste a vyučuje systematickú teológiu. Takže okrem toho tiež vyučuje o C.S.LEWISovi, o jeho živote a tvorbe. A sme veľmi radi, že prijal naše pozvanie v rámci týždňa C.S.LEWISa a bude k vám hovoriť na tému C.S.LEWIS a láska. Takže užite si to a vybrajte si otázky, máte naozaj pred sebou výnimočného hostia, skvelého experta a človeka. A sme veľmi radi, že prijal naše pozvanie.
Ďakujem. That's all the Slovak I know. But although this is the only word I know, when you all clapped and applauded, I wanted to do the same. So I am very glad to be with you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about C.S. Lewis on love. I want to talk until 12:30, so that you have time to ask questions, and if you want to challenge and disagree with anything, you are very welcome to do that. I'm very happy with that. But I want to talk about C.S. Lewis on love. There are lots of things, of course, I could say. I suppose that the most important question for any person really is a question of what are we here for in this world as human beings. And one answer, of course, is that we are not here for any purpose at all. We have simply arrived, we have simply emerged as a result of an evolutionary process. So there's no point asking what are we here for. An alternative answer is that we are here for God, because God has made us, and that, of course, is what C.S. Lewis believed. But even people who think that humans have no great purpose still very often think that love is the most important thing in life. So even from the standpoint of atheism or agnosticism, in practice, human love is the most important thing for many of them. And since Christians believe that God is love, then there is a connection here in our thinking. We can think together about the nature of love, whatever our religious standpoint may be. Now, C.S. Lewis, of course, wrote a book about love. Some of you have read that. Some of you, I guess, will be reading it, called The Four Loves, and he makes a distinction between different kinds of love. There is affection, there is friendship, there is romantic or erotic love, and there is the supreme love, the love of God, for which people often use the Greek word agape. But although C.S. Lewis wrote about love, and what he has to say there is important, he found out about love the hard way. And I want to say something here about C.S. Lewis, his life and his experience, and how he came to think about love in this context. C.S. Lewis lost his mother when he was young. He was only about 9 years old. Until then, his life had been a happy one. He enjoyed being creative, he enjoyed being imaginative, he had a very rich imagination. And he felt feelings of longing and great desire for Well, for what? He didn't know. He knew there was a longing. He knew there were things in the world which could stir up a deep desire in him. But he was aware of the desire without knowing what he wanted. So he was like that even when he had a secure childhood before the loss of his mother. And then he lost his mother, and this was a devastating experience for him, particularly because his father didn't seem to handle it all very well. After that, he went off to school and had bad school experiences. He experienced a school where there was some cruelty and sadism. Then he experienced a school where the people he was with weren't very interested in the life of the mind and the imagination, which were the things that mattered to him. So he went from a secure and happy childhood through the loss of his mother to a bad school experience, and he became hurt and embittered, and he lost his Christian faith as well. He became an atheist in his teenage years at some stage. Now, he then intellectually, through his reason, came to believe that atheism was wrong. He came not only to believe in God, but to believe in Christ as well, so he became a Christian. And this meant that having intellectually resolved the problem of religion as far as he was concerned, it set him free to love. It opened himself up to love, not simply the love of friendship and affection, but eventually he got married. So what happens when he gets married? This looks like the fulfillment of his longing and his desire. He believes in God and Christ, and now he has a human love, and he really was in love with his wife. She had cancer, and she died not long after the marriage. And he wrote a book, which again some of you have read, and others of you I guess will read, called A Grief Observed, in which he wrestles with the problem of the nature of a God who could take away from you that which was, in human life, the most important thing you had, the one person you loved most, namely his wife. And this meant that Lewis had to think hard about the nature of love on the basis of his own experience, sad experience. Now, some people thought that in writing this book, A Grief Observed, about his experience of doubting God after his grief, some have thought that Lewis lost his faith. That isn't the case. If you read the letters he was writing to other people at that time, you will find that he was dealing with the problem of loss and grief and of love. He was also dealing with general intellectual doubts about faith. And if you look at that correspondence, you find his faith is still there. What he's doing in The Grief Observed is working through a process of emotional torment and agony. He's not doubting the existence of God, but he is asking at certain points what kind of God it is exactly he is to be believed in. Is this God a sadist? Does God enjoy leading you along to a certain point and then breaking you down? Is that what God is like? And when he writes like that, you realize that in Lewis's case, to talk about God as a sadist was to take up something from his own experience in school, because he'd experienced a sadistic headmaster. In fact, the head teacher at his first school, or one of his first schools, was someone who was later declared actually insane. Not all head teachers are insane, I believe. There are some sane head teachers, but this one was declared insane. So his cruelty and sadism was a sign of mental imbalance. So Lewis, at the end, towards the end of his own life, because he didn't live long after his wife had died, he begins to connect the cruelty of God, or the feeling that God is cruel to him, and that's different. And I'll explain the difference in a minute. He began to connect that, I think, with his school experiences. But in a book called Mere Christianity, which was a series of talks he gave on radio, broadcast during the Second World War, Lewis said that faith is the capacity to hold on to what your reason once told you was true, even when your moods and emotions change. So faith is not irrational. If you came to the conclusion that faith was correct, if you came to that conclusion reasonably, then when your emotions begin to tell you it's wrong, it's not your reason that's telling you it's wrong, and faith means holding on in the middle of that. And that, I think, is something we see happening in grief observed. But now I seem to be talking about faith and not about love, so let's begin to make some connections here. One thing we find when we read the grief observed is that it is a remarkable parallel in some ways to another book Lewis wrote before his wife died. In fact, it's a book which she worked on with him. It was his favorite of all his books. He wrote a book which was his favorite, but the people who reviewed it often didn't like it or did not understand it. And it's a book called Till We Have Faces. And in this book, Till We Have Faces, which is unlike anything else that C.S. Lewis wrote, C.S. Lewis tells a story. He takes an ancient Greek myth, and what he does is to tell it in his own way and change it. It's really a story set in pre-Christian times of a woman who is very, very ugly. It's a story about an ugly woman. And this ugly woman has a very beautiful half-sister. Is she jealous towards the half-sister? No, she's not. She's actually very fond of her half-sister, and she begins to act like a kind of mother towards the half-sister, and then her half-sister is taken away from her, removed from her, because of a whole story and series of incidents which I won't go into now. But the sister, therefore, the sisters are separated. And in some respects, it is the fault of the ugly sister that this has happened. And the novel describes the way that the ugly sister becomes a queen. And she puts the veil over her face in order for people not to see her ugliness too much. And she rules as a very good and effective queen, but all the time there is pain and sadness and bitterness, because the person she loved most, her half-sister, is wandering throughout the earth. The gods have put a kind of curse in her, that she must wander far, far away. And she begins to write the story. After many years like this, the sister, who's the queen, begins to write the story of her own experience, and she attacks the gods very bitterly. And in her attack on the gods, because this is pre-Christian days, so it's not just one god, an attack on the gods, she says that the gods are cruel. What the gods do is to blow you up like a bubble, and then they prick you and bring you down. That's what the gods do. And C.S. Lewis uses exactly that phrase, exactly that image in The Grief Observed. Early in The Grief Observed, he talks like being a bubble that has grown up and been pricked like that, so that he is, in a way, finding in his own experience the reality he talks about in a myth which he deliberately reworked in this book, Till We Have Faces. And in A Grief Observed, he works through from the experience of anger and doubt to the experience of understanding and reconciliation with God, which is exactly what happens in Till We Have Faces. And in Till We Have Faces, what the Queen discovers at the end is that her love has been a distorted kind of love. Her love for her half-sister has been a compensation for her own rejection. Because she's ugly, she has been treated with indifference, talked to in a way which is insensitive, and all that hurt has been hidden and hardened, and as a result she's channeled her love for her half-sister in a possessive way. So that when she loses her half-sister, she has lost the person she loves, but that love always was formed in the wrong way. She didn't realize that the love came as a kind of compensation for her own sense of being rejected. So Till We Have Faces is a book about distorted love, and in A Grief Observed, Lewis is trying to examine himself a little bit to ask what kind of love exactly did he have towards his wife. He doesn't doubt that the love was a good and pure love in many, many ways, but he does ask himself whether there was a way in which the love of God had become, in one way, set aside, eclipsed, that is to say, whether he had lost something deeply religious when he grieved over his wife. He asked himself really whether his grief is the sign of something in him that was incomplete in his love for God. It doesn't all come out in Grief Observed just like that, but when you look at the circumstances, that's the way he feels. And Lewis' literature does deal in more than one place with the way our loves can become distorted. Some of you may encounter sometime a book of his called The Great Divorce. And there again, people are on a journey of self-discovery. And that's one of the big challenges Lewis puts to us, as a matter of fact. What kind of love is the love that we actually have? And what would count as a pure love? What is pure love really like? Because he's aware of the way in which we just don't understand ourselves very well. You and I are made up of a whole lot of forces inside us, which we don't understand, and it can take us a lifetime to understand them. We say we are free. So I might say, I am free to choose. I'm free to love, and I'm free not to love. When you read C.S. Lewis, you realize, not like that. Deep things form me in my background, in my environment, in my experience. And my love is not what I think it is. And I think of myself as being free, and I very often am not free. So what Lewis wants to do is to alert us to self-deception. He thinks there's nothing more common for us than to deceive ourselves, particularly in the area of love. C.S. Lewis knew about contradiction between love and death. What threatened his love for God was the death of his wife. He had taken a long time in his lifetime to be drawn out of his shell, as he says. I'm like a person who gradually through life began to dare to trust and to love. And so I do trust and I do love. I finally have that. I have a marriage, and you take it away. And for many people, the contradiction between love and death is unbearable. But what do I mean by that phrase, contradiction between love and death? Well, the contradiction is this. that in true love for someone, you want that person to live forever. And you want to live forever. But death makes sure that we don't live forever. So it seems that as a human being, if I am destined for love, if God has made me to be the kind of person who can love, give and receive love, then God is playing tricks. Because God has made me to be the kind of person who can give and receive love, but He also made me the kind of person who will die, and the person I love will die. So God has set up this whole world as a cruel, cruel contradiction. And for many people, the contradiction is so sharp that they've decided not to love. They've hardened themselves and said, I will not love, because in the end, love is going to be hurt. It can be hurt in many ways, but the ultimate hurt is death. So I'm not going to love. I'm going to protect myself against what happens when I love, which will be disappointment, dismay, depression, and all those things. That, I think, is the issue that Lewis is wrestling with. Now you'll be saying to yourselves, this Stephen Williams is a very cheerful person. He travels all the way from Northern Ireland just to depress us and talk to us about pain and self-deception and all those things. Well, maybe that's his culture in Northern Ireland, but here in Slovakia, we want something a little bit more upbeat. We want something a bit more happy. Come on, man, you've got a music stand in front of you. Give us something we can jump to, dance to, sing about. And Lewis does. Because Lewis's work is full of dance and triumph and those things. And this comes out in his book, The Four Loves. In the end, The Four Loves is a book about love triumphant. That you can, in the Christian life, experience an absolutely triumphant love. What Lewis does is, apart from working through the differences between affection and friendship and eros, from which we get the word erotic, apart from working through all those things, he actually talks about a very basic distinction between two kinds of love: gift love and need love. When I think of love, I can think of something I can give, or I can think of something I need. So that kind of distinction between those two things is always there in what he writes. But when it comes to the end of his work, he talks about a kind of love which is higher than those. And he says, at this point, I'm going to stop, because I can't go on any further, because I'm not a good enough person to write. And that love is appreciative love, particularly the appreciation of God. Because there is a kind of love which, when we experience it from God, is so overwhelming, it takes you over so much that it puts everything else in its context. And in response, when God's love is felt with that power in our hearts, in response, we want to appreciate God. But appreciation is not the same as giving. We can't give God love in the sense we can give other humans love, because God is so much higher. We need God's love. Of course, we seek to love Him in return, but there is something much higher where God is concerned. There is appreciation of God in the deep, deep sense, which leads to worship. And when we begin to enter that world, it changes everything else. Every natural love, without the love of God, without understanding, experiencing God's love, in one way will collapse or fail us. Whether we're thinking friendships, affection, or sexual or romantic love, those things, in the end, can't stand on their own. But when the love of God is experienced, then all those things find their place. Romantic or erotic or sexual or affectionate or friendship, those things can have their proper place and they can live and survive and flourish and grow just as long as God's love for us is appreciated and we love God in return. So in the end, it is a word of triumph for Lewis. And what he wants to say to us here is that in Christianity, you have unity of love and joy. It's possible to have joy, it's possible to have love, it's possible to have both of them together. And that puts everything else in its place. So that in the end, even the pain of death becomes diminished and becomes overcome by a triumphant love. Now, look at me, I'm very good. I said I'd stop at 12:30. I've actually stopped at 12:29, which if you knew me, it's amazing. I'm capable of going on and on and on, because I'm from Wales, and people from Wales talk on and on and on. And C.S.LEWIS, by the way, his father's family was from Wales. So that's the most important thing to tell you, really. You can forget everything I said about love. Just remember, his father's family came from Wales, okay? That's all I've got to tell you. Okay, now let's have some questions and comments. I know some of you read these books, as I said. Yeah, question.
Thank you very much. Time for questions.
Thank you. You said that every other type of love needs the love of God, but I'm an atheist, and I think it is not needed. Like, why do you, or why does C.S.LEWIS think that I need the love of God if I don't believe in God?
Thank you. Of course, C.S.LEWIS here has to be taken in context. That is to say, Lewis, as far as he was concerned, Lewis had rational arguments for believing in God. Now, his position is this, that actually, atheism is something which intellectually cannot be sustained. So he thinks on intellectual grounds that atheism is mistaken. That's his own conviction. So now, he's come to that conclusion. So what happens then when atheists love? Well, they can, of course, experience most of the forms of love talked about here. Affection, friendship, romantic love. Yes, of course. Atheists, like everybody else, can experience those things. But in the end, they can't experience all those things in their fullness, in all their strength, because the giver of all those things is God. And when God is loved as well, and when God's love for us is experienced, all those things are enriched, the affection, the friendship, and the romantic. But of course, that depends on the persuasiveness of that depends on two things. One is experience. Here we have to talk about human experience. But the other is Lewis's arguments, because he worked himself out of atheism by an intellectual conviction. So that he would say atheists can experience these things, but they don't have a deep ground for believing in God, and therefore the experience of God's love, which is central in Christianity, is something which is they don't have. Therefore, they have to experience all the different loves of human life without experiencing together with the love of God, which means they are more poor, he thinks. But that's his position. But of course, in a way, I mean, our discussion really is about atheism, isn't it, really, and the kind of love which atheists would experience and believe in.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Some other questions? Yes.
Hello. So you were talking about a gift love and a need love.
Yeah.
And I kind of got like, you should give your love as a gift and not like need it. But, so when I love my friends, I feel like I need them. Is that wrong? Should I change it?
Yes.
No, it's not wrong at all. As human beings, in our sheer humanity, we are made to need love as well as to give love. The one being who does not need love is God. God has no need, and yet he is the supreme giver of love. But no, there's nothing at all wrong with needing. Actually, we would be wrong to deny that need. And sometimes, I don't know what it's like in the culture here, but sometimes in Northern Ireland, it is said that men, are much more reluctant to say they need love than women sometimes are. That is sometimes the experience of some of us in Northern Ireland. Actually, men and women are exactly, boys and girls, exactly the same place. We do need love, and we need to be able to give as well. Nothing wrong with that at all. What becomes wrong, of course, is when our human need of love can be connected with lots of other things in our lives. And there can be distortions or things which make it too much, that our need is bound up, it's tied up with certain experiences, with certain weaknesses, with all those things, which means that every good and right thing, like needing love, has something in it which bends it and distorts it and makes something in it which is unpleasant or not good. Every good thing has something which spoils it, left to itself. That's why we need God and Christ and forgiveness and redemption, to make our need love good and right and pure.
Thank you very much. Stephen, you said that there is a contradiction of love and death,
Yeah.
which produce pain, and you said that there are some people who decide not to love. I would say that maybe many people follow this path because they want to avoid pain. And my question would be how to encourage them to follow different paths. Why?
Well, I know a number of answers could be given. So, as an atheist, for example, one might give one answer, and I respect whatever answer be given. From within a Christian framework, I think contradiction between love and death can only be removed if you believe that beyond death there is something more. So, as far as Lewis is concerned, death is not the last word. So, if death is not the last word, there is the possibility of love continuing beyond the grave. Which means that even if we have suffered severe loss and severe grief, and it is quite right for Christians to grieve like everybody else when they lose some of their love, grief does not have a last word because death does not have a last word. To put it another way, love has the last word and not death. So the contradiction is removed in that respect. But as to how to persuade people of that, well, there's more than one way of doing it, I guess. I would want to directly persuade people that there is reason to believe in life beyond death and the resurrection of Christ, which is not simply wishful thinking, because at times of death, people very often suddenly find themselves wishing there's life after death. And wishful thinking is destructive of Christianity in many ways. Of course, atheists, Hindus, all of us have wishful thinking, so this is possible for all of us. But it is dangerous when I simply believe in life after death because I want it. That's certainly true. So I want to persuade people that there is reason for believing in life after death, and therefore that it's right to try to free yourself up to love. Because if we don't free ourselves up to love because of the pain involved in love, we do something to ourselves which brings us down as human beings. My inability to love means my humanity is in some way not shaped correctly, reduced. Yeah. So I would want to say to someone, look, the price you are paying for not loving, because you know about the disappointments it can bring, particularly the great disappointment of death, the price you are paying is you are having to set aside something fundamental in your humanity. As a human, you are meant to love. This is what enriches, what makes human life what it is. And in that context, I want them to talk about the possibility of a life beyond death, which means that love itself will not come to an end.
Thank you. I wanted to be silent, but Dušan's question actually pointed to the point of your lecture, which was most interesting for me also, the contradiction between the death and love. Well, the way some people are dealing with it by just, how did you say, the denying love or giving up love? I don't know very many people like that. I think most, more common is to see people who are denying death, which can have many forms, like you can ignore the fact or try to forget about it, or not to deal with it, not to think of the death, or this cult of youth and health and the right food and trying to care for your body to live as long as possible. That's Dušan's way of approaching this problem. But I would like to challenge you with an idea. I think that the contradiction between the death and love is a genuine one, and I personally believe it cannot be resolved. And I view Christianity as also a way of just escaping or avoiding the problem by saying that you are actually going to live forever, so the love has a meaning because it will continue. Well, so how would you persuade me that this is not just an escape or a wishful thinking?
Thank you very much. By the way, we realized with our students that taboos changed actually. Instead of having taboo from sexuality, we have taboo of mortality.
Mortality, yeah.
Yeah, so please.
Thank you. Yes, I agree, of course, that there are many people who deal with the question of death in different ways. I wasn't saying that all people experience this, the contradiction. You're quite right. I'm only thinking of some people. In terms then of Christianity resolving the problem by belief in life after death, you would have to demonstrate this rationally. I would press you to a rational demonstration. I would ask you for the basis on which you believe this, because it certainly is true, as I said, that humans wish for things. Religious people, like everybody else. Christians, like all religious people. But if you ask how it is that Christian belief in life after death came to exist, there is no reason for saying, or if you think there is, you'd have to give me a reason, no reason for saying that it was in order to resolve this problem. I mean, belief in life after death was widespread in any case in the ancient world. What you did not have was the belief in the resurrection, the bodily resurrection from the dead of a man who had lived. Now, in the case of the New Testament, and this is what Lewis became convinced of, the New Testament seeks to give some grounds for belief in the resurrection of Jesus. He doesn't say, you just got to believe this, or doesn't say, we want this to be the case. It attempts to offer grounds for that belief. Of course, 2,000 years on, we cannot access this rationally in one way. No one can, not in the way they could in those days. But the evidence for the resurrection of Christ from the dead is what persuaded people to believe in a specifically Christian sense in life after death. So the belief did not come about through an attempt to resolve the contradiction. In fact, I would say the contradiction as I described it between love and death is described in a rather abstract, even a kind of Western way. People in the ancient world wouldn't have quite viewed it that way at all. They wouldn't have thought of it as contradiction in that sense, although we might say, of course, subconsciously it's there. Freud's thinking about love and death is very interesting in this connection. But if you say to me it's wishful thinking, I'm going to say to you, well, let me hear your reasons for this. For what reason would you say that Christian belief, life after death, rose out of wishful thinking? That's the kind of debate you would have to have.
Thank you very much. There is a space for the last question and last very short answer.
I'll give you the answer first in that case.
Hello.
Hello.
When I think of the word love, I think that a distinction between emotion and what is not emotion is to be made. How does C.S.LEWIS deal with the issue of emotion when talking about love, and how are the four loves connected with the issue of emotion that he writes about?
How can I give a short answer to this question? The short answer is this, that Lewis does of course believe that love contains emotion. But he doesn't think that love, to be true love, has to have an emotional surface all the time. In other words, the emotions come and go. If you say I have love, but I've never felt any emotion, that's wrong. But if you say that for me to love someone, I have to feel that emotion all the time, then that's mistaken as well. And in a short answer, that's all I feel I can say, and I know I'm not doing justice to a good and important question.
Stephen, thank you very much for coming here. Thank you. We would want to talk to you space for individual talks. Thank you very much. Dobrą puć.